Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of short playthroughs of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is Armor Ambush. This was a 1982 release for the 2600, and it came out through Mattel's M Network label. Now this was a label, as we said a couple of weeks ago, that was originally set up to port simplified versions of Intellivision games to Atari consoles. The original Intellivision version of this was known as Armor Battle rather than Armor Ambush. Not entirely sure why the name changed, but most of the M Network games changed their name in between their original Intellivision incarnation and their 2600 VCS incarnation. The porting process was very much one way, because Mattel were seemingly absolutely fine with getting their games released on Atari's platform, but Atari didn't want any of its games ported to Intellivision, so it was very much a one-way street in that regard. So Armor Ambush is a tank battle game that distinguishes itself from Atari's own combat with randomly generated battlefields, terrain effects, so like your tank goes faster or slower over certain types of terrain, and unlike combat, you're controlling two tanks instead of just one. So by pulling back on the joystick, you can switch between those two tanks and control them independently. Like combat, this is a strictly two-player affair as well. So there's no AI programmed into the game, so you can't play it by yourself. So I will hopefully recruit someone to help me out with playing this today. So let's go play Armor Ambush. Okay, here we are again with Atari Flashback Classics. And today we're taking a look at Armor Ambush, which is one of the M Network games. Unlike Air Raiders, which we looked at previously, this one actually is a port of an Intellivision game. So I think it's called Armor Battle on the Intellivision. Let's take a quick look at the instructions first. This is a two-player only game, so I'm being ably assisted by my wife Andy today. But since we've both spent most of the day not getting dressed or having a wash or anything, she decided not to appear on camera today. So it's just me, but she is playing the role of player 2. So the object of the game is to knock out enemy tanks while avoiding hits on your tanks. You ambush the enemy, swing into position and fire. 3 hits and your opponent's tank blows up. Each round of the battle takes place on a different battlefield. At the start, both players have 25 tanks. I don't know if we'll play the whole match because it takes quite a long time. Although it takes slightly less time than the Intellivision version where you had 40 tanks each. So yeah, game's up when either player loses all 25. So you and your opponent are rival tank commanders. You each have 2 tanks per round with a total of 25 in the game. You switch command from tank to tank. I'm being assisted by a cat, so I guess we're having a 4-player game today because there are both cats considering having a fight right now. No, they're just kissing instead. That's all right. Okay, so your controls in this: you push the joystick forward to move the tank forward, push it left and right to turn left and right, and you pull the joystick back to switch control between your 2 tanks. So you have 2 tanks on screen at all times until one of them gets destroyed. So you can't go backwards. Pulling back switches between them. In the original Intellivision version, you also had the facility to drop mines as well, because the Intellivision controller had a lot more buttons than the Atari 2600 does, but since you've only got one button here, you can just shoot. Only other thing worth noting here is that when you shoot in this, you have a bit of recoil, so you get knocked sort of off your original aim. So that helps get around one of the problems with combat, which we'll come to at some point in the near future, where you can just keep blasting away at someone because you keep facing the same direction. So if you get them stuck in a corner, you can get point after point after point. The difficulty switches in this one. The left difficulty switch, in B position, your shots don't bounce, and in B position, so a miss is just a miss. But if you change it to A setting, your shots will bounce, and you can shoot yourself with them as well. Okay, that's probably pretty much everything we need to see from that at the minute, as the rest is just 2600 manual. So, black and blue both have 25 tanks. We are ready to play. So, I am black and Andy is blue. So, there we go. One difference that this game has over combat is that the different types of terrain affect how your tank moves. So if I move on this plain bright green stuff, you're pretty fast. If you move on the dark green stuff, you go very slowly, or you can't even go through some of it. I think they're supposed to be buildings or something like that. The road seems to be the fastest. Oh, you hit me. Ooh. Eh. Oh, you did. What killed you there? I don't know. Maybe you can lay mines in this and I didn't realise. Is the thing in the Intellivision version, when you laid mines, you couldn't see them, so they just sort of became active after a little while. But they don't seem to be mentioned anywhere in the manual, so to be honest, I don't really know if they're in this version or not. I thought they weren't, but maybe they are. Oh, no. Get away. You'll go and guard that place there. Oh, no. There we go. Revenge. Oh, no. So, not sure if you can actually change the difficulty switch in the middle of a game, but let's try that. If I set left difficulty to A now, does that mean our shots... Yes, they do start bouncing, so for the rest of the game, we can bounce shots around corners. It's quite nice you can change that in the middle of the game like that without having to start all over again. And you can go through the water, but again, that slows you down very much. And I guess these are supposed to be bridges. Yeah, so you can't drive off the edge of those. So yeah, this was... Oh dear. Oops. So this got a fair bit of praise on the Intellivision for adding a bit to the combat formula. Just because, I mean, the terrain's the main thing, but the fact that the levels are... I still can't quite work out if they're completely randomly generated or if it's just pulling from like a pool of them. But either way, there's a lot of different battlefields to fight on, and that makes the game a little bit different each time you play it. And even from round to round, it's a bit different. So, whereas in combat, you did have the different game variants. Some of which had the maze walls in there, but they were the same each time. So, like if you played on the hard maze in combat, you always had the same level layout. Right. Player 2 is busy looking at cats. Oh, and I'm shooting myself in the face. Two tank thing's actually quite interesting because it sort of makes you think. I mean, it's not super deep or anything like that, but how did that even bounce off? Yeah, it's not super deep or anything like that, but it does sort of make you think a little bit more about where you're putting your tanks and where you're leaving your reserve one. I think I blew myself up there. A loss for me. I think these might be predefined levels looking at them because I recognise that last one from what we did before. So I think there's sort of a pool of levels that it pulls from and it just picks randomly from each time. I've got the figure 30 in my head for some reason. I'm sure I read somewhere that there's like 30 different variations on the stage or something like that, but I might be making that up. Down to 12 for blue, 21 for me. Left undefended. Or is she using it as a trap? Oh. Yeah, I'm mildly baffled by what causes you to just randomly blow up like that. Let me just drive... Oh. Ruin my experiment. Alright, I'm gonna... So in theory, I've dropped a mine where I started. So if I leave it a moment and then... No? I guess not. Maybe it's a bug. That wouldn't be out of the question. These are old games. They were still sort of trying to define the way that various things worked. And inevitably, a few little bugs slipped through the cracks in a few places. That was quite an interesting thing. The blue tank can sort of camouflage itself in the water. Whereas the black tank doesn't really have anything that's the same colour as itself to hide in. I guess it can sort of hide in the trees here. And snipe from inside, but I mean it's still pretty obvious where you are. Nice. 7 to go for blue. Like I say, the Intellivision original of this gave you 40 tanks each, which made it going for a very long time. But this is actually going quite a bit quicker than I thought it would. I don't know if the reduced tank count is because the 2600 can't count up any higher than 25, but I don't think that's the case, because if you look at other games that have scoring systems, they go well above that in many cases, but it may just have been that they decided to kind of rebalance it for this release here, particularly if they did strip out the mine laying system, which they may or may not have done. Amphibious battle. I think part of the trouble with tank games is that it's quite difficult to maneuver yourself out of a situation where you're being shot at. So like if you get into a position where someone can just repeatedly fire on you, then since you don't have like a sidestep function or anything like that, it's quite tricky to move out of the way, especially if you're on terrain that slows you down quite a bit. But I guess that's one of those things that's sort of refined over time as the two-player battle format developed and made use of different methods of control and different vehicles and different weapons and so on. Oh, one more tank for blue. It's the final battle. Oh, not going... Perfect way to finish, huh? Just my final battle was resolved by blue exploding for no apparent reason, and my cat is trying to get on my computer keyboard. There we go. Anyway, that was Armour Ambush, formerly known as Armour Battle for the Intellivision. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.